Dr. Marcus Chen had seen enough alien anatomy in his 15 years as a xenobiologist to know when something was seriously wrong. The creature before him on the medical table was unlike anything in the galactic database, 7 feet tall with iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to silver, 6 arms ending in delicate clawed hands, and a crown of bony protrusions that pulsed with a faint bioluminescence. What concerned him most was the gaping wound across her torso, leaking a luminescent blue fluid that his scanner identified as blood. The injury was severe enough to be fatal if left untreated, and the creature, clearly female based on her body structure, had been unconscious when the rescue team brought her aboard the research vessel Harmony. Status report, Marcus called to his assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim, as he began sterilizing his instruments. Unknown species, found drifting in an escape pod near the Veil Nebula. No identification, no transponder signal. The pod was badly damaged, probably from weapons fire. Sarah's voice carried the professional calm of someone who'd worked in deep space medicine for years. Scans show she's lost about 30% of her blood volume. We need to operate now if we're going to save her. Marcus nodded, pulling on his surgical gloves. The Harmony was a peaceful research vessel, part of humanity's ongoing mission to explore and document life in the galaxy. They weren't equipped for combat situations, but their medical bay was state-of-the-art, designed to handle any species they might encounter. As he approached the patient, Marcus noticed something unusual. Despite being unconscious, the alien's bioluminescent crown was pulsing in a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. More intriguingly, the pattern seemed to shift when he moved closer, becoming more complex and urgent. Her neural activity is off the charts, Sarah reported from the monitoring station. It's like she's dreaming, but the brainwave patterns are unlike anything I've seen. Marcus began his examination, noting the alien's physiology. Her skin was surprisingly warm to the touch, and the scales felt almost silky despite their armored appearance. The wound itself appeared to be from some kind of energy weapon, the edges cauterized but still bleeding. It would require careful work to repair the damaged tissue without causing further harm. I'm going to need you to synthesize a blood substitute, Marcus said, beginning to clean the wound. Use the protein synthesis chamber and match the composition of her blood as closely as possible. As he worked, Marcus found himself fascinated by the alien's anatomy. Her 6 arms weren't just for show, they each served different functions. 2 were clearly primary manipulators, similar to human arms but longer and more flexible. 2 others appeared to be secondary arms, perhaps for fine detail work. The final pair were positioned lower on her torso and seemed to be designed for balance and support. The bioluminescence in her crown grew brighter as he continued his work, the patterns becoming more intricate. Marcus wondered if it was some kind of communication method or perhaps an unconscious response to stress. Blood substitute is ready, Sarah announced. But, Marcus, you need to see this. She handed him a data pad showing the results of the genetic scan. She's not just any alien species. According to the database, these markings and physiological traits match historical descriptions of the Zephyrian royal family. If I'm reading this right, she might be royalty. Marcus paused in his work. The Zephyrians were legendary in galactic politics, an ancient species known for their technological prowess and strict cultural protocols. They rarely interacted with other species and were notoriously protective of their privacy. Having one of their royalty aboard a human research vessel was unprecedented. That explains the escape pod, Marcus mused. Someone was either trying to kidnap or assassinate her. He returned to his work, carefully suturing the damaged tissue. The alien's physiology was remarkably efficient, her body was already beginning to heal around his repairs. As he worked, he noticed that her breathing had become more regular, and the bioluminescence in her crown had settled into a softer, more rhythmic pattern. Vital signs are stabilizing, Sarah reported. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Marcus continued his careful work, marveling at the sophistication of the alien's biology. Her circulatory system was far more complex than a human's, with multiple hearts working in coordination to pump blood through her 6-limbed body. The synthetic blood substitute seemed to be integrating well with her natural blood chemistry. As he worked to seal the final layer of tissue, something unexpected happened. The alien's eyes opened, large, multifaceted orbs that reflected light like cut gems. They were a deep violet color, and they tracked immediately to Marcus's face with startling intelligence. For a moment, neither moved. Marcus found himself looking into eyes that held wisdom and authority beyond anything he'd ever seen. There was pain there too, but also a calculating intelligence that was taking his measure. The alien tried to speak, her voice a melodious combination of tones that his translator struggled to interpret. The sounds were beautiful but completely incomprehensible until the ship's linguistic computer began to parse the language patterns. Where am I? The translation came through with a slight delay, and Marcus could hear the underlying authority in her voice even through the mechanical interpretation. "You're aboard the research vessel Harmony," Marcus said gently, not moving away from her but keeping his hands visible. "You were badly injured." "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, and I've been treating your wounds." The alien's gaze moved from his face to his hands, which were still positioned near her wound. Marcus realized he was still technically touching her, his gloved hand resting on her torso as he completed the final suture. Her expression changed suddenly, the bioluminescent patterns in her crown shifting to what could only be described as alarm. She tried to sit up, but Marcus gently placed his other hand on her shoulder. "Please, don't move yet. The repairs are delicate, and you've lost a lot of blood." What happened next would change everything Marcus thought he knew about alien cultures and diplomatic protocol. The alien, the Zephyrian Royal, went completely still. Not the stillness of compliance, but the frozen tension of someone who had just realized they were in an impossible situation. Her multifaceted eyes widened, and the bioluminescence in her crown began pulsing in rapid, complex patterns. She stared at Marcus's hands, one resting on her shoulder, the other near her wound, as if they were instruments of some cosmic significance. "You." She began, her voice carrying harmonics that the translator couldn't quite capture. "You are touching me." Marcus was confused by her tone. It wasn't fear or anger, but something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like awe mixed with profound confusion. "I'm sorry if I violated some cultural protocol," Marcus said, starting to pull his hands away. "I was only trying to help." "No." The word came out sharp and commanding, stopping Marcus mid-motion. The alien's eyes fixed on his with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. "Do not move." The medical bay fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Sarah stood frozen at her station, clearly sensing that something significant was happening but not understanding what. The alien took several deep breaths, her gaze never leaving Marcus's face. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of centuries of tradition and law. "I am Queen Lyralii of the 7th Zephyrian dynasty," she said, each word measured and precise. "For 3,000 years, the laws of my people have been absolute and unchanging. No being may touch the royal person save in ceremony or combat." Marcus felt his blood run cold. He'd violated some fundamental law without knowing it. "Your Majesty, I apologize. I was only trying to save your life." "I didn't know, there is one exception," Queen Lyralii continued, her voice growing softer but no less authoritative. "One being who may touch the royal person freely, without ceremony or permission." The bioluminescence in her crown pulsed once, bright and unmistakable. "Only my consort may touch me so." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus felt the universe shift around him, as if gravity itself had changed direction. The implications of what she'd just said were staggering. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. Queen Lyralii's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained fixed on his. "By our most ancient laws, you have claimed the right of touch. Whether you knew it or not, whether you intended it or not, you have placed your hands upon the royal person in healing and comfort." She paused, and Marcus could see her struggling with concepts that clearly challenged everything she'd been taught. "By our laws, this makes you my consort. My equal. My. The translator struggled with the final word before settling on something that made Marcus's heart stop. My intended mate. The medical bay erupted in chaos as Sarah dropped her data pad and the ship's emergency communication system began chiming with incoming messages. But Marcus heard none of it. All he could focus on were those multifaceted violet eyes and the weight of destiny they seemed to carry. This is impossible, he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't sure if he meant the situation or the way his heart was responding to her gaze. Queen Lyralii attempted to sit up again, this time more carefully. Marcus instinctively moved to support her, his hands sliding around her back to help her balance. The moment his skin made contact with her scales, the bioluminescence in her crown flared bright enough to cast shadows across the room. And yet, she said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been wonder, here we are. As the ship's communication system continued to chime and Sarah stammered attempts at protocol, Marcus found himself trapped in a moment that would redefine not just his life, but potentially the relationship between humanity and one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. All because he had chosen to save a life. The Queen's scales were warm beneath his touch, and he could feel the steady rhythm of her multiple hearts beating in complex synchronization. Despite everything, the confusion, the implications, the sheer impossibility of the situation, Marcus realized that his primary concern was still her well-being. How do you feel? He asked, the doctor in him overriding the diplomatic crisis. Any pain? Dizziness? Queen Lyralii studied him with those remarkable eyes, and, for the first time since waking, something that might have been a smile touched the corners of her mouth. You ask after my health when your words could reshape the galaxy, she observed. This is unexpected. You're my patient, Marcus said simply. Everything else is secondary to making sure you're all right. The bioluminescence in her crown shifted to what Marcus was beginning to recognize as a more peaceful pattern. Whatever the cultural implications of their situation, he had apparently passed some kind of test. Then, we shall have much to discuss, Marcus Chen of the research vessel Harmony, Queen Lyralii said. About healing, about laws, and about the future neither of us saw coming. As if summoned by her words, the ship's communication system delivered a priority message that would make their situation infinitely more complicated. Dr. Chen, came the voice of Captain Rodriguez from the bridge, we've just received a transmission from a Zephyrian battle fleet. They're demanding the immediate return of their queen, and they're not taking no for an answer. The bridge of the Harmony had never felt smaller. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood before the main view screen, watching as 5 massive Zephyrian warships materialized from hyperspace like metallic thunderclouds. Each vessel was easily 3 times the size of her research ship, their hulls gleaming with the same iridescent quality as their queen's scales. Dr. Chen, report to the bridge immediately, she called over the intercom, her voice tight with barely controlled tension. Marcus looked at Queen Lyralii, who had insisted on standing despite his medical protests. She moved with the fluid grace of her species, but he could see the strain in the way she held herself. The healing process would take time, even with her remarkable physiology. Your Majesty, you should rest, Marcus said, checking the readings on his medical scanner one more time. The surgery was extensive, and your body needs time to. My people have found me, Lyralii interrupted, her bioluminescent crown pulsing with what Marcus was learning to recognize as determination. I must speak with them before they do something irreversible. Sarah Kim had been frantically checking diplomatic protocols since the fleet's arrival. Marcus, according to the Galactic Database, Zephyrian military doctrine authorizes the use of lethal force to recover royal family members. They consider any delay an act of war. The weight of the situation settled over Marcus like a physical burden. Somehow, in the space of a few hours, his simple act of medical care had created a potential interstellar incident. As they made their way to the bridge, Queen Lyralii walked beside him, her 4 primary hands clasped behind her back in what appeared to be a formal posture. Tell me about your captain, she said as they entered the elevator. Is she wise? Very, Marcus replied without hesitation. Captain Rodriguez has successfully negotiated first contact with 6 different species. She saved more lives through diplomacy than most people save through medicine. Good. We will need wisdom for what comes next. The elevator doors opened onto a bridge in controlled chaos. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, but Marcus could feel the underlying tension. On the main screen, the lead Zephyrian vessel dominated the view, a sleek, deadly work of art that somehow managed to be both beautiful and terrifying. Dr. Chen, Captain Rodriguez called without turning around. I need to know the medical status of our guest, and I need to know it now. The Zephyrians are demanding immediate transport, and they're not being subtle about their intentions if we refuse. Queen Lyralii stepped forward before Marcus could respond. Captain Rodriguez, I am Queen Lyralii of the 7th Dynasty. I request permission to address my fleet. Rodriguez turned, and Marcus watched her expression shift from professional concern to genuine shock as she took in the alien royal's presence. The queen was imposing even in her weakened state, tall, regal, with an aura of authority that seemed to fill the bridge. Your Majesty, Rodriguez said, executing what Marcus hoped was an appropriate bow. Of course. But, I should warn you, your fleet commander seems agitated. Admiral Thane is protective, Lyralii replied with what might have been fondness. He has served my family for 40 years. His concern is understandable. She moved to the communication station with that same fluid grace. Please open a channel to the fleet flagship. The view screen shifted to show the interior of a Zephyrian command bridge. The alien who appeared was clearly military, his scales were a darker shade of purple than the queen's, and his bioluminescent crown was smaller but pulsed with urgent, staccato patterns. Behind him, Marcus could see dozens of other Zephyrians working at stations that seemed to blend technology with organic design. My queen. Admiral Thane's voice carried relief, anger, and fierce protectiveness in equal measure. We have been searching for you for 3 standard days. Are you injured? Who are these beings? Why have they not immediately, Admiral? Queen Lyralii's voice cut through his questions like a ceremonial blade. I live. I am healing. These beings saved my life when my escape pod was found drifting and damaged. The Admiral's crown patterns shifted to what Marcus guessed was confusion. My queen, we are prepared to extract you immediately. Medical teams are standing by, and I will not be extracted, Admiral. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus watched as every Zephyrian on the bridge of the flagship went completely still. Admiral Thane's expression shifted through confusion to what looked like panic. My queen, I do not understand. These are aliens. Unknown beings. Surely you cannot mean to remain among them when proper care awaits, Admiral Thane, Queen Lyralii said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I invoke the doctrine of sovereign choice. My decision stands. Marcus felt Captain Rodriguez's questioning gaze and realized she was looking to him for some kind of explanation. He could only shake his head, he understood no more of Zephyrian politics than she did. Admiral Thane's reaction, however, was immediate and dramatic. The alien's bioluminescent crown flared bright enough to be visible even through the view screen, and his scales seemed to ripple with some powerful emotion. My queen, the doctrine of sovereign choice applies only to matters of. The Admiral's voice trailed off as his gaze shifted from the queen to Marcus, who was standing nearby. The alien's multifaceted eyes widened as he took in their proximity. No. It cannot be. Admiral, Queen Lyralii said gently, may I present Dr. Marcus Chen of the human research vessel Harmony. He is the physician who saved my life. Marcus stepped forward, uncertain of the proper protocol but determined to be respectful. Admiral, it's an honor to meet you. I want you to know that Queen Lyralii received the best medical care we could provide. Her injuries were severe, but she's healing well. Admiral Thane stared at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. When the alien spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Dr. Chen, you say you provided medical care to Her Majesty? Yes, sir. Emergency surgery and blood replacement therapy. Without immediate intervention, her injuries would have been fatal. And this medical care, it required physical contact with the royal person? Marcus felt the trap before he understood it. Yes, Admiral. Surgery always requires, he touched me, Admiral, Queen Lyralia interrupted, her voice carrying no shame or regret. He placed his hands upon me to heal my wounds. By our ancient laws, he has claimed the right of consort. The reaction on the Zephyrian bridge was immediate and chaotic. Officers began speaking rapidly in their own language, their bioluminescent crowns flashing in patterns too complex for Marcus to follow. Admiral Thane himself seemed frozen, staring at the Queen as if she had announced the end of the universe. "This is impossible," the Admiral finally whispered. "My Queen, surely this is some misunderstanding. The ancient laws were written for our people, not for aliens." "The laws make no distinction, Admiral," Queen Lyralia replied firmly. "They speak only of beings and persons. Dr. Chen is both." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly out of her depth but trying to maintain some semblance of diplomatic order. "Perhaps we could discuss this situation calmly." "I'm sure there's a reasonable solution that, Captain Rodriguez," Admiral Thane said, his attention shifting to her with laser focus. "Do you understand what your physician has done? What he has claimed by his actions?" "Not entirely," Rodriguez admitted. "But, whatever cultural protocols have been violated, I'm sure Dr. Chen acted with no malicious intent. He was simply trying to save a life." "Malicious intent is irrelevant," Admiral Thane replied. "By ancient law, this human has claimed royal consort rights. If the Queen accepts this claim, he becomes her equal in authority and standing. A co-ruler of the Zephyrian Empire." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus felt the weight of every gaze in the room, but his attention remained fixed on Queen Lyralia. Her crown pulsed in slow, thoughtful patterns, and her expression was unreadable. "The laws also state," she said finally, "that consort rights must be acknowledged by both parties. Dr. Chen has claimed the right through action. I must now choose whether to accept or reject that claim." "My Queen," Admiral Thane said urgently, "surely you cannot consider accepting. He is an alien. An unknown species. The implications for the dynasty, for the empire, are significant," Queen Lyralia agreed. "Which is why I invoke my right to the traditional period." Admiral Thane's crown flared so brightly that Marcus had to squint. "My Queen, the traditional period is for those already committed to union. It is not meant for evaluation of potential consorts," the Queen corrected. 7 days to determine compatibility, suitability, and mutual consent. It is my right under the law, Admiral, and I claim it. Marcus found his voice at last. Excuse me, but shouldn't I have some say in this? I never intended to claim anything. I was just trying to help. Queen Lyralia turned to him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his heart skip. Not just authority or amusement, but genuine curiosity and something that might have been hope. Dr. Chen, do you reject the claim your actions have made? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus realized that everyone, human and Zephyrian alike, was waiting for his answer. The easy response would be to reject it, to claim ignorance and cultural misunderstanding. It would solve the diplomatic crisis and return everyone to their proper places in the universe. But, as he looked into Queen Lyralia's multifaceted eyes, Marcus found himself thinking about the past few hours. The way she had moved with unconscious grace despite her injuries. The intelligence and strength in her voice. The way her bioluminescent crown had responded to his presence, creating patterns of startling beauty. I don't reject it, he heard himself say. But, I need to understand what it means before I can accept it. Admiral Thane made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a growl and a sigh. Dr. Chen, you are asking to potentially become co-ruler of an empire spanning 14 star systems. The responsibilities alone are considerable, Queen Lyralia agreed. which is why the traditional period exists. 7 days for us to learn about each other, to understand the implications of our choices, and to decide our path forward. Captain Rodriguez cleared her throat diplomatically. Your Majesty, Admiral, while I respect your traditions, the Harmony is a research vessel, not a diplomatic platform. Perhaps there's a more appropriate location for this evaluation period? The law is specific, Queen Lyralii replied. The traditional period must be spent in the location where the claim was made, under the protection of those who witnessed it. Dr. Chen claimed consort rights aboard this vessel. Here we must remain. Admiral Thane's expression suggested he would rather face a fleet of enemy warships than navigate this particular legal situation. My queen, security protocols alone will be maintained by your fleet, the queen said firmly. You may establish a protective perimeter, but you will not interfere with the traditional period. That would violate law more serious than any breach of protocol. Marcus watched the interplay of authority and tradition, fascinated despite his own involvement in the situation. Queen Lyralii was clearly accustomed to command, but she was also operating within a framework of law and custom that constrained even royal prerogative. Admiral, he said, surprised by his own boldness, I give you my word as a physician that Queen Lyralii's safety and well-being will be my primary concern. She's still healing from serious injuries, and she needs rest and proper care. Admiral Thane studied him with those multifaceted eyes, and Marcus felt as if he was being evaluated on levels he couldn't even comprehend. You would place her welfare above your own interests? I'm a doctor, Marcus replied simply. That's what I do. Something in the Admiral's expression shifted slightly. Not approval, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Very well, Admiral Thane said finally. The fleet will maintain position. 7 days, as the law requires. But, Dr. Chen. The alien leaned forward, his crown pulsing with unmistakable warning. Should any harm come to our queen, your species will learn why the Zephyrian Empire has endured for 3 millennia. Understood, Admiral, Marcus replied, meeting the alien's gaze steadily. But, you should know that any attempt to harm her will have to go through me first. The threat and the promise hung in space between the two ships, while Queen Lyralii watched the exchange with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as approval. 7 days to learn about each other. 7 days to decide the future of not just their own lives, but potentially the relationship between their species. As Admiral Thane closed the communication channel, Marcus realized that the simple act of saving a life had become the most complex situation of his career. And, somehow, looking at Queen Lyralii's graceful profile as she spoke quietly with Captain Rodriguez about accommodations, he found himself looking forward to the challenge. The observation deck of the Harmony had been hastily converted into a suitable space for their unusual diplomatic situation. Captain Rodriguez had moved her best furniture from the officers' lounge, and the botanical section had contributed several plants that created a more welcoming environment. Through the large viewports, the Zephyrian fleet maintained its watchful presence, their ships positioned in a perfect defensive formation that spoke of centuries of military precision. Marcus sat across from Queen Lyralii at a table that had been adjusted to accommodate her unique physiology. She moved carefully, still healing from her injuries, but her dignity remained uncompromised. The bioluminescence in her crown had settled into a calm, steady rhythm that Marcus was learning to associate with thoughtfulness. Tell me about your world, Dr. Chen, she said, her 4 primary hands wrapped around a specially formulated nutrient drink that Dr. Kim had prepared based on her biology. I have studied many species in preparation for eventual contact, but humans remain elusive in our databases. We're a relatively young species in galactic terms, Marcus replied, sipping his coffee and marveling at how surreal the situation had become. We only achieved faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. Most of our exploration has been focused on scientific discovery rather than territorial expansion. Curious, Queen Lyralii observed. Most young species we encounter are either aggressively expansionist or fearfully isolationist. Your people seem to be neither. We learned early that cooperation yields better results than conflict, Marcus explained. Our first contact with the Centauri Republic taught us that we had more to gain by sharing knowledge than by competing for resources. The Queen's crown patterns shifted to what Marcus was beginning to recognize as interest. The Centaurians are known for their defensive nature. How did your species gain their trust? Marcus smiled, remembering the stories from the history books. A human medical ship encountered a Centaurian colony ship that had suffered a catastrophic failure. Instead of demanding something in return for aid, the human crew simply helped. They shared their emergency supplies, provided medical care, and asked for nothing but friendship in return. And this established trust between your species? More than that, Marcus said. It established a pattern. Humans tend to help first and negotiate later. It's not always the most efficient approach, but it's earned us friends across the galaxy. Queen Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her multifaceted eyes studying him with an intensity that made Marcus self-conscious. Is this why you helped me? This pattern of your species? Partly, Marcus admitted. But, mostly I helped you because you were injured and I'm a doctor. It's really that simple. Simple, the Queen repeated, as if the word was foreign to her. In Zephyrian culture, nothing is simple. Every action has layers of meaning, political implications, dynastic considerations. The idea of helping without ulterior motive is difficult for us to understand. But, you understand it now? I am beginning to, she said, and Marcus caught a hint of something that might have been wonder in her voice. Your people fascinate me, Marcus Chen. In my study of galactic civilizations, I have found that most species follow predictable patterns. They seek advantage, territory, resources, or dominance. But, humans seem to seek, what? Knowledge? Friendship? Understanding, Marcus said after considering the question. We want to understand the universe and our place in it. Everything else follows from that. The Queen leaned back in her chair, a gesture that looked surprisingly human despite her alien physiology. Understanding. Yes, I can see how that would appeal to your species. What about your people? Marcus asked. What do Zephyrians seek? Order, she replied without hesitation. Stability. The preservation of our civilization and our way of life. For 3,000 years, we have built our empire on the foundation of law, tradition, and careful expansion. Careful expansion? We do not conquer worlds, Marcus. We invite species to join our empire, offering them protection, technology, and stability in exchange for their allegiance. Most accept willingly, once they understand the benefits. Marcus nodded, impressed despite himself. That's actually quite elegant. It has served us well, Queen Lyralii agreed. But, it also creates complications. Every decision must be weighed against centuries of precedent. Every action must consider its impact on the broader empire. It is why your simple act of medical care has created such a complex situation. Speaking of which, Marcus said, pulling out his medical scanner, I should check your healing progress. The Queen stiffened slightly as he approached, and Marcus paused. Is something wrong? No, she said quickly, then, more slowly, it is only that, among my people, physical contact is highly regulated. What you consider routine medical care represents a level of intimacy that my culture reserves for the most sacred relationships. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I can run the scans from a distance if that would be more appropriate. Marcus, Queen Lyralii said gently, you have claimed consort rights. By our law, you now have the privilege of touch. It is not improper, it is expected. She extended one of her 4 arms toward him, and Marcus realized she was giving him permission to proceed. Carefully, professionally, he began his examination. Her scales were warm beneath his hands, with a texture like silk over steel. The bioluminescence in her crown grew brighter as he worked, pulsing in complex patterns. Your healing rate is remarkable, Marcus observed, studying the readings on his scanner. The tissue regeneration is proceeding faster than my most optimistic projections. Zephyrian physiology is efficient, she replied, though Marcus noticed her voice had taken on a slightly different quality. We evolved on a world with limited resources. Those who could heal quickly and efficiently were more likely to survive. Fascinating, Marcus murmured, genuinely absorbed in the medical data. Your cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen. The way your body integrates synthetic compounds with organic healing is. He stopped talking when he realized Queen Lyralii was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Her crown patterns had shifted to something entirely new, complex, rhythmic, almost musical in their complexity. What is it? He asked, concerned he had said something inappropriate. You are genuinely fascinated by my biology, she said, and there was something like amazement in her voice. Not as a curiosity or an oddity, but as a physician studying something remarkable. Of course I am. Your physiology represents millions of years of evolution in a completely different environment. From a medical perspective, it's incredibly exciting. Queen Lyralii was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than he had heard it before. Marcus, in my 40 years of life, I have been studied by countless physicians, scientists, and scholars. They have examined my biology to assess my fitness to rule, my ability to produce heirs, my genetic compatibility with various political alliances. None have ever looked at me the way you do. How do I look at you? As if I were a person rather than a political entity. As if my body were something wondrous rather than something to be catalogued for diplomatic purposes. Marcus felt something shift between them, a moment of understanding that went beyond cultural differences or political complications. You are wondrous, he said quietly. Not just your biology, but you. The way you carry yourself, the way you think about problems, the way you've handled this impossible situation with such grace. The Queen's crown patterns grew even brighter, and Marcus realized he was witnessing something rare. A genuine emotional response from someone who had been trained from birth to control every aspect of her behavior. This is why the traditional period exists, she said softly. Not merely to assess political compatibility, but to discover if two beings can truly see each other beyond their roles and responsibilities. And what do you see when you look at me? Marcus asked, surprised by his own boldness. I see a healer who places life above law. Compassion above protocol. I see someone who acts from instinct rather than calculation, who saves lives because it is right rather than because it is advantageous. She paused, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the light from her crown. I see someone who might help me remember what it means to be a person rather than merely a queen. The moment was interrupted by the chiming of the ship's communication system. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the intercom with carefully controlled urgency. Dr. Chen, Your Majesty, please report to the bridge. We have a situation. Marcus and Queen Lyralii exchanged glances, the intimate moment shifting instantly to shared concern. They made their way to the bridge, where they found Captain Rodriguez and her senior officers gathered around the tactical display. What's happening, Captain? Marcus asked. Long-range sensors have detected 3 ships approaching at high speed, Rodriguez replied, pointing to the display. They're not responding to communication attempts, and their drive signatures don't match any known configuration. Admiral Thane's image appeared on the main screen, his crown pulsing with urgent patterns. Captain Rodriguez, our analysis suggests these vessels are of Korathian design. This is a significant development. Who are the Korathians? Marcus asked. Queen Lyralii answered, her voice grim. Pirates, raiders, and, worse. They have been a persistent threat to peaceful species for decades. Their technology is stolen from various civilizations, which makes them dangerous and unpredictable. My queen, Admiral Thane continued, I recommend immediate extraction. If the Korathians have tracked you to this location, your safety cannot be guaranteed. No, Queen Lyralii said firmly. The traditional period is sacred law. I will not abandon it because of pirates. Your Majesty, Captain Rodriguez interjected diplomatically, the Harmony is a research vessel. We're not equipped for combat against raiders. Marcus watched the tactical display, noting the approaching ship's formation and speed. Admiral, what's your fleet's combat capability against 3 Corathian vessels? Under normal circumstances, more than adequate, Admiral Thane replied. However, our primary mandate is the protection of the Queen. If combat becomes necessary, we cannot guarantee the safety of your vessel while engaging the enemy. Then, we need another option, Marcus said, studying the display more carefully. How long until they reach us? Approximately 6 hours at their current speed, the tactical officer reported. Marcus turned to Queen Lyralii. Your Majesty, you know more about Corathian tactics than any of us. What are they likely to do when they arrive? They will demand tribute or surrender, she replied. If refused, they will attack without mercy. They show no mercy to civilians and take no prisoners they cannot sell as slaves. Then, we need to make sure they don't want to fight us, Marcus said, an idea beginning to form in his mind. Admiral Thane's crown flared with alarm. Dr. Chen, whatever you are considering, I strongly advise, trust me, Marcus interrupted. I'm a doctor, not a warrior. But, sometimes the best way to handle a bully is to make them realize they've picked the wrong target. Queen Lyralii studied him with those remarkable eyes, and Marcus could practically see her evaluating his suggestion against her own knowledge of Corathian psychology. What do you have in mind? She asked finally. Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces watching him, human and Zephyrian alike. We're going to give them something they've never encountered before. A human diplomatic solution. Which is? Marcus smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. We're going to make them an offer they can't refuse, and, then, we're going to make them want to refuse it anyway. As he began to explain his plan, Marcus realized that the next few hours would test not just his medical skills or diplomatic abilities, but his understanding of what it truly meant to be human in a galaxy full of predators and prey. The 3 Corathian vessels dropped out of hyperspace with the predatory grace of sharks sensing blood in the water. Each ship was a patchwork of stolen technology, hull plating from a dozen different species, weapons systems that didn't match, and drives that left irregular energy signatures. They looked dangerous precisely because they looked desperate. Incoming transmission from the lead vessel, Communications Officer Torres reported from the bridge of the Harmony. Put it through, Captain Rodriguez commanded, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the bridge. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of a Corathian command deck. The alien who appeared was reptilian in appearance, with mottled gray-green scales and small, predatory eyes. His crew behind him was a mix of species, the usual collection of outcasts, criminals, and desperates that made up pirate crews across the galaxy. Attention vessels, the Corathian captain said, his voice carrying the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to easy victories. I am Captain Vex of the Raider Fleet Blood Tide. You will prepare for boarding and surrender all cargo, technology, and personnel of value. Marcus stepped forward before Captain Rodriguez could respond. Captain Vex, I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, representing the Terran Federation Medical Research Division. Before you proceed with any hostile action, I think you should know exactly what you're dealing with. Captain Vex's eyes focused on Marcus with predatory interest. Human, I presume? We've heard rumors about your species. Soft, weak, sentimental. Your surrender will be processed efficiently. Actually, Marcus said conversationally, I was hoping you might help me with a medical problem. You see, we have a patient aboard who's been exposed to a rather unusual pathogen. Nothing immediately fatal, but it is highly contagious and has some interesting properties. Queen Lyralii, standing beside him, maintained perfect composure despite not knowing where Marcus was going with this approach. Her crown patterns remained steady, betraying nothing. I fail to see how your medical problems concern me, human, Captain Vex said impatiently. Well, the pathogen in question has a fascinating effect on neurochemistry, Marcus continued, his voice taking on the enthusiastic tone of a researcher discussing a particularly interesting case. It doesn't kill the host immediately. Instead, it gradually breaks down higher brain functions while leaving basic motor skills intact. The affected individual becomes increasingly aggressive and unpredictable over a period of several days. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Eventually, they lose all sense of self-preservation and attack anything that moves. The final stage involves a complete breakdown of the immune system, leading to a rather unpleasant death. Captain Beck's expression had shifted from arrogance to uncertainty. "You are attempting to deceive me." "Not at all," Marcus replied cheerfully. "In fact, I'd be happy to show you the medical files. The pathogen was discovered on a derelict ship we investigated 3 weeks ago. Fascinating stuff, really. We've been studying it ever since." Admiral Thane's image appeared on a secondary screen, his crown pulsing with what Marcus hoped was understanding rather than confusion. "Captain Vex, perhaps you should reconsider your approach. Human medical research has produced some unpredictable results." "The Zephyrians speak truth," Marcus continued. "Just yesterday, one of our research assistants accidentally exposed herself to the pathogen. She's currently in quarantine, but the psychological changes are already becoming apparent." "Show me," Captain Vex demanded. Marcus gestured to Sarah Kim, who had been briefed on the plan and was playing her role perfectly. She appeared on screen looking disheveled and agitated, her hair mussed and her eyes slightly unfocused. "Dr. Chen," she said, her voice carrying an edge of barely controlled hysteria, "when can I leave quarantine? The walls are closing in, and I need to do something. Anything. Maybe check on the weapons systems." "Yes, that sounds right. I'm afraid Dr. Kim can't be released yet," Marcus said sadly. "The pathogen is still in its early stages, but you can see the personality changes beginning to manifest." Sarah suddenly lunged toward the camera, her face contorted with artificial rage. "I said let me out. I'll show them what human weapons can do. I'll show them all." The transmission cut as if someone had hastily terminated the connection. Marcus turned back to Captain Vex, whose expression had grown considerably more cautious. "As you can see, the pathogen has some rather unfortunate effects on human psychology," Marcus said. "Now, normally this wouldn't be your problem, but here's the interesting thing about this particular organism: it's transmitted through direct contact and has a particular affinity for species with reptilian physiology." Captain Vex's eyes widened. "You are lying." "Computer, display the pathogen analysis," Marcus called out. The main screen filled with what appeared to be complex medical data, actually a harmless bacterial culture that Dr. Kim had prepared for their botanical samples, but it looked impressive enough to be convincing. "Note the cellular structure," Marcus continued, pointing to various parts of the display. "It's specifically adapted to bond with scales and similar integumentary structures. In fact, our analysis suggests that reptilian species experience an accelerated progression of symptoms." Queen Lyralii stepped forward, her voice carrying regal authority. "Captain Vex, I am Queen Lyralii of the Zephyrian Empire. I can confirm that this pathogen represents a significant threat. My medical advisors have recommended maintaining a safe distance from any infected vessels. But here's the really interesting part," Marcus added, his tone growing more excited. "We believe the pathogen may have military applications. Imagine being able to render enemy crews incapacitated without damaging their ships or cargo. The Terran Federation is very interested in our research." Captain Vex was no longer looking predatory. How far does this contagion spread?" "Current estimates suggest a range of approximately 50 kilometers in open space," Marcus replied, pulling the number out of thin air. "The organism can apparently survive in vacuum for limited periods, spreading through microscopic particles that attach to ship hulls." 50 kilometers? Captain Vex's voice had risen in pitch. "Give or take," Marcus said cheerfully. "The exact transmission mechanism is still under study." Of course, if you'd like to volunteer for our research program, I'd be happy to share our data. We could really use more test subjects. There was a long pause as Captain Vex stared at the screen, clearly weighing his options. Marcus could practically see the calculation taking place, potential profit from raiding versus the risk of exposure to an unknown pathogen that specifically targeted his species. What do you want? Captain Vex asked finally. Nothing from you, Marcus replied honestly. We're quite content to continue our research. In fact, we'd prefer if you maintained your distance. The last thing we need is an uncontrolled exposure event. But, Queen Lyralii added smoothly, if you were to continue on your current course and maintain a safe distance, we would be grateful for your assistance in mapping the pathogen's dispersal pattern. Your ship's sensors could provide valuable data from outside the contamination zone. Marcus had to admire her improvisation. She had not only supported his deception but had found a way to make the pirates useful while keeping them away. You want us to help with your research? Captain Vex asked, clearly confused by the unexpected turn of events. Scientific cooperation benefits everyone, Marcus said earnestly. The more we understand about this pathogen, the better we can contain it. And, who knows? Your sensor data might help us develop a cure that could be valuable to reptilian species across the galaxy. There was another long pause as Captain Vex consulted with his crew. Marcus could see heated discussion taking place on the pirate bridge, with various crew members gesturing frantically and pointing at displays. Finally, Captain Vex returned to the communication pickup. Dr. Chen, what is your estimated time for completion of this research? Hard to say, Marcus replied thoughtfully. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how the pathogen responds to our containment protocols. And, you will share any medical data relevant to treatment? Absolutely. That's how science works, shared knowledge benefits everyone. Captain Vex made what Marcus hoped was a decision. Very well. We will maintain position at a safe distance and provide sensor support for your research. In exchange, you will share all relevant medical data and notify us immediately if the contamination risk changes. Agreed, Marcus said solemnly. Thank you for your cooperation, Captain. Your assistance in the name of scientific progress is appreciated. As the transmission ended, the bridge of the Harmony erupted in barely suppressed celebration. Captain Rodriguez turned to Marcus with an expression of amazed respect. Dr. Chen, that was either the most brilliant piece of psychological warfare I've ever witnessed, or you've just committed us to a massive deception that could backfire spectacularly. Both, probably, Marcus admitted. But, it bought us time and avoided bloodshed. Admiral Thane's image appeared on the screen, his crown pulsing with what Marcus was learning to recognize as amusement. Dr. Chen, I am beginning to understand why your species has been so successful in diplomatic situations. You have managed to turn pirates into research assistants. Queen Lyralii moved closer to Marcus, her voice low but carrying a note of genuine admiration. That was remarkable. You used their own greed and fear against them, but you also offered them something genuinely valuable, the possibility of contributing to knowledge that could save lives. It seemed like the most human approach, Marcus replied. We prefer solutions that leave everyone better off than they were before. Even pirates? Especially pirates. They're usually pirates because they see no better alternative. Give them a chance to be something more, and sometimes they'll surprise you. Over the next several hours, the Corathian ships maintained their distance while providing detailed sensor readings of the area. The pirates seemed genuinely invested in the research, offering suggestions and observations that were actually quite useful for the ship's legitimate scientific work. Status report, Marcus called to Dr. Kim as he made his rounds. The pathogen is behaving exactly as predicted, she replied with a grin. Of course, since it's actually a harmless botanical culture, that's not saying much. Any word from our research assistants? Captain Vex just sent over a detailed analysis of local gravitational anomalies. He thinks they might affect pathogen dispersal patterns. Marcus shook his head in amazement. We may have accidentally turned a pirate captain into a citizen scientist. Queen Lyralii found him in the medical bay later that evening, reviewing the day's events and checking on her healing progress. "How do you feel about what we did today?" she asked as he ran his medical scanner over the repair sites. "Satisfied," Marcus replied honestly. "No one was hurt, we avoided a conflict, and we may have given those pirates a glimpse of what they could accomplish through cooperation instead of violence. But we deceived them. We misdirected them," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference. We never actually lied about anything, we just allowed them to draw the conclusions we wanted them to draw." Queen Lyralii was quiet for a moment, her crown patterns shifting through complex configurations. "This is what I mean about humans being difficult to understand. You solved a problem with creativity, compassion, and misdirection, but you feel no guilt about the deception. Should I? I do not know," she admitted. In Zephyrian culture, deception is considered dishonorable except in specific circumstances involving warfare or protection of the dynasty. But your deception served the greater good and harmed no one. "Sometimes the right thing to do isn't the straightforward thing to do," Marcus said, completing his scan. "Your healing is progressing beautifully, by the way. Another day or two and you'll be completely recovered." "And then?" Marcus met her multifaceted gaze, seeing the question behind the question. "Then, we decide what happens next. The traditional period ends tomorrow. Are you prepared for that decision?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Over the past 6 days, he had learned more about Queen Lyralii than he had thought possible. He had seen her wisdom, her strength, her compassion, and her willingness to challenge her own assumptions. More importantly, he had begun to understand what it might mean to stand beside someone who carried the weight of an empire on her shoulders. "I know what my heart tells me," he said finally. "But, my heart isn't the only consideration, is it?" "No," she agreed softly. "It is not. But, perhaps it should be given more weight than either of us initially thought." As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the medical bay viewport, Marcus realized that tomorrow would bring more than just the end of the traditional period. It would bring the beginning of whatever future they chose to create together. And, for the first time since this all began, he found himself genuinely excited about that possibility. The seventh dawn found Marcus in the observation deck, watching the sunrise paint the nearby nebula in shades of gold and crimson. The Zephyrian fleet maintained its vigilant formation, while the Korathian ships had become unofficial research partners, their pirate crews now enthusiastically contributing to what they believed was vital medical research. "Unable to sleep?" Queen Lyralii's voice came from behind him, melodious even without her translator's assistance. Marcus turned to see her approaching with that fluid grace that had become familiar over the past week. Her healing was complete, the bioluminescence in her crown was bright and healthy, and she moved without any sign of the injuries that had brought them together. "Too much to think about," he admitted. "Today we make a decision that could change everything." "Everything has already changed," she replied, settling into the chair beside him. "The question is whether we will acknowledge that change or try to pretend it never happened." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light play across the stellar formations. Finally, Marcus spoke the question that had been weighing on his mind. "What happens if we choose this path? I mean, practically speaking. I'm a research doctor from a small colony world. You're the ruler of an interstellar empire. How does that work?" Queen Lyralii's crown patterns shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated careful consideration. "There would be challenges," she admitted. "You would need to learn our customs, our laws, our ways of governance. The transition would not be easy." "And, politically?" "That is the more complex question," she said. "Some of my advisors will see our union as an opportunity, a chance to establish stronger ties with humanity and gain access to your species' unique perspectives on problem solving. Others will see it as a dangerous precedent that threatens traditional power structures." Marcus nodded, having expected as much. "What about you? What do you see?" Queen Lyralii turned to face him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the nebulous colors. I see a chance to be more than just a queen bound by tradition. I see a partner who makes me want to be better than I am. I see someone who has shown me what it means to act from compassion rather than calculation. She paused, her voice growing softer. But, mostly, I see someone I do not wish to say goodbye to. Before Marcus could respond, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried a note of urgency. Dr. Chen, Your Majesty, please report to the bridge immediately. We have a priority transmission from the Terran Federation Council. Marcus and Queen Lyralii exchanged glances. News of their situation had apparently reached the highest levels of human government. They found the bridge bustling with activity. Admiral Thane was present on one screen while another showed the seal of the Federation Council. Captain Rodriguez looked like she had been awake all night managing communications between various government agencies. Ah, Dr. Chen, came a familiar voice as the Federation Council screen activated. Marcus recognized Director Sarah Wells, head of the Federation's Xenological Affairs Division. I understand you've found yourself in an interesting situation. That's one way to put it, Director, Marcus replied diplomatically. Indeed. The Council has been in emergency session since Admiral Thane's report reached us yesterday. I must say, your actions have created quite a stir in both the diplomatic and scientific communities. I'm sorry if I've caused any problems. Problems? Director Wells laughed. Dr. Chen, you may have just opened the door to the most significant diplomatic opportunity in human history. The Zephyrian Empire is one of the most stable and advanced civilizations in this sector. A formal alliance could provide humanity with unprecedented access to knowledge, technology, and trade opportunities. Admiral Thane's image shifted slightly. Director Wells, while the Federation's enthusiasm is noted, I must remind you that this situation involves our Queen. Political considerations are secondary to her personal choice and the requirements of our law. Of course, Admiral, Director Wells replied smoothly. We have no intention of pressuring anyone. However, I did want Dr. Chen to understand that he has the full support of the Federation, whatever he decides. Marcus felt the weight of expectation from multiple directions, his own government, the Zephyrian Empire, and the crew of the Harmony who had become invested in the outcome of this unprecedented situation. Thank you, Director, he said finally. I appreciate the Federation's support. There is one more matter, Director Wells continued. If you choose to accept the consort position, the Federation would like to propose the establishment of a formal embassy aboard the Zephyrian capital ship. Dr. Kim has volunteered to serve as our representative, facilitating ongoing scientific and cultural exchange. Sarah Kim stepped forward, her expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It would be an incredible opportunity, Marcus. Think of what we could learn, what we could share. Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces watching him, human and Zephyrian alike. All of them seemed to understand that this moment would reshape the future in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend. Your Majesty, he said, turning to Queen Lyralii, I believe the decision is ultimately yours. By your laws, you must either accept or reject the claim I unknowingly made. Queen Lyralii rose, and instantly the atmosphere on the bridge shifted to something approaching ceremony. Her bioluminescent crown pulsed in slow, formal patterns that Marcus had never seen before. By the ancient laws of the Zephyrian Empire, she began, her voice carrying the weight of millennia of tradition, I, Queen Lyralii of the 7th Dynasty, acknowledge the claim of consort right made by Dr. Marcus Chen of the human species. She paused, her multifaceted eyes finding his across the bridge. Furthermore, I accept this claim freely and, without reservation, taking Marcus Chen as my equal in authority and my partner in rule. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus felt as if the universe had shifted around them, rearranging itself to accommodate this new reality. Marcus Chen, Queen Lyralii continued, do you accept the responsibilities and privileges of consort to the Zephyrian throne? Do you pledge to serve the Empire with wisdom, compassion, and dedication to the welfare of all its people? This was it, the moment of final decision. Marcus looked around the bridge one more time, seeing the hope and anticipation in every face. Then, he looked back at Queen Lyralii, this remarkable being who had somehow become the center of his universe in the space of a week. "I accept," he said simply. "I pledge to serve beside you with everything I have to give." Admiral Thane's crown flared so brightly that it was visible even through the view screen. "By the authority vested in me as Admiral of the Fleet and Keeper of the Royal Law, I witness and acknowledge this union. Long live Queen Lyralii and Consort Marcus." The response from the Zephyrian fleet was immediate. Every ship simultaneously fired their ceremonial weapons in a complex pattern that painted the space around them with harmless but spectacular energy displays. The effect was breathtaking, like the universe itself was celebrating. Director Wells was practically beaming. "Congratulations to both of you. This is a historic moment for all our species." But Marcus barely heard the congratulations and well wishes that filled the bridge. His attention was focused entirely on Queen Lyralii as she approached him, her crown patterns now shifting through configurations he had never seen, complex, beautiful, and unmistakably joyful. "Hello, Consort Marcus," she said, using his new title for the first time. "Hello, my queen," he replied, marveling at how natural the words felt. "Are you ready for your first diplomatic challenge?" she asked, and he could hear the amusement in her voice. "What's that?" She gestured toward the view screen, where Captain Vex of the Corathian Raiders was requesting communication. "It seems our research assistants would like to request political asylum. Apparently, they've decided they prefer scientific research to piracy." Marcus looked at the pirate ship, then back at Queen Lyralii, and began to laugh. "You know what? I think I'm going to enjoy being a consort. Even when it means spending your honeymoon integrating a group of reformed pirates into the Imperial Research Service?" "Especially then," Marcus replied, taking her hand in his. "After all, what's the point of having power if you don't use it to help people become better than they were?" Queen Lyralii's crown patterns shifted to something that Marcus was certain meant deep happiness. "This is why I chose you," she said softly. "This is why I will always choose you." As the Harmony prepared to dock with the Zephyrian flagship and Marcus began his transition from ship's doctor to galactic consort, he reflected on the strange path that had led him here. A simple act of medical compassion had somehow become the foundation for an interstellar alliance and the beginning of a love story that would span the stars. Captain Rodriguez approached them with a data pad. "Your Majesties, I have the preliminary reports from our new research assistants. It seems Captain Vex has identified 17 potential scientific research sites in this sector alone." "Excellent," Queen Lyralii replied. "We shall review their proposals and integrate them into our exploration protocols." Marcus shook his head in amazement. A week ago, they were pirates. Now they're contributing to scientific advancement. How does that happen? "People rise to meet expectations," Queen Lyralii observed. "When you expected Captain Vex to be reasonable, he became reasonable. When you offered him the chance to contribute to something meaningful, he embraced it." "Very human of him," Marcus said with a smile. "Very human of you to see the possibility in the first place." As they prepared to transfer to the Zephyrian flagship, Dr. Kim approached with her own data pad and an expression of barely contained excitement. "Marcus, I've been reviewing the preliminary cultural exchange protocols. Did you know that Zephyrian medical knowledge includes techniques for regenerating damaged neural tissue? And their botanical sciences have identified over 3,000 species with potential pharmaceutical applications? And what do we offer them in return?" Marcus asked. "Hope," Queen Lyralii said unexpectedly. "Your species offers us hope that there are still new ways of thinking, new approaches to old problems. That is worth more than any technology." Admiral Thane's final transmission before they departed carried news that would set the tone for their future together. "Your Majesties, we have received preliminary responses from 17 different species requesting diplomatic contact with the Human Zephyrian Alliance. It seems news of your union has traveled quickly through political channels. Already? Marcus asked. Word of the first interspecies royal marriage in galactic history was bound to spread rapidly, Queen Lyralii explained. Every species will want to understand what this means for the balance of power in this sector. And, what does it mean? Queen Lyralii's smile held promises of adventures he could barely imagine. It means we have work to do, Consort Marcus. Empires to build, problems to solve, and a future to create that neither humans nor Zephyrians could achieve alone. As their shuttle approached the flagship, Marcus looked back at the Harmony one last time. The research vessel that had been his home and workplace was now just one ship among many in a fleet that stretched across the starscape. But it had been the place where everything changed, where a simple medical procedure had somehow become the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history. Any regrets? Queen Lyralii asked, following his gaze. Marcus considered the question seriously. A week ago, his biggest concern had been calibrating his diagnostic equipment for a routine survey mission. Now he was about to become co-ruler of an interstellar empire, with responsibilities he was still trying to understand and a future that held possibilities he had never dared to imagine. None, he said finally, and meant it completely. The shuttle bay of the Zephyrian flagship was vast, gleaming, and filled with beings whose bioluminescent crowns created a constellation of welcome. As Marcus and Queen Lyralii disembarked, the assembled crowd fell to their knees in a gesture of respect that took Marcus's breath away. Rise, Queen Lyralii commanded, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. Today we do not kneel to tradition, but stand together to face the future. As one, the assembly rose, their crown patterns shifting to configurations that Marcus somehow understood without translation, joy, hope, and anticipation for whatever came next. Dr. Sarah Kim stepped forward, her new role as Federation ambassador evident in her formal diplomatic attire. Your Majesties, the embassy staff is ready to begin work immediately. We have 17 research proposals, 12 diplomatic initiatives, and one very important question. Which is? Marcus asked. Sarah grinned. When's the wedding ceremony? Because apparently, half the galaxy wants to attend. Marcus looked at Queen Lyralii, who was regarding him with an expression of perfect contentment despite the chaos surrounding them. Well, he said, I suppose we should give them something to remember. And, as they walked together into their shared future, Marcus realized that sometimes the best adventures begin not with grand plans or desperate searches, but with a simple decision to help someone who needs healing. Behind them, the former pirates of Captain Vex's fleet maintained their positions as newly appointed research vessels, their crews already planning their next scientific expedition. Ahead of them lay challenges they couldn't yet imagine, discoveries that would reshape their understanding of the universe, and a love story that would become legend among the stars. It had all started with a medical emergency and a doctor who cared more about saving lives than following protocols. Now it would become something that neither species could have achieved alone, a bridge between worlds, built on the foundation of human compassion and Zephyrian wisdom, strong enough to support whatever future they chose to create together. The galaxy, it seemed, was about to become a much more interesting place.